Today's Daf is Daf Nun. I think today is the day when you use Gula to say Pashas Hamon for Panasa and all that. There's a whole Yiratzim that they say, quite a long Yiratzim. So all Yiddish have Panasa, Begashmis, Beruchnis, Oisha, recovered, V'teich Shalom. We're up to Daf Nun, and we are discussing the machlekes between the Chachamim, the Tanakama, and Rab Shimon. Which is the strictest? According to the Chachamim, Skila is stricter than Seifa. According to Rab Shimon, Seifa is Skila than Skila. According to the Chachamim, Hedek is stricter than Chenek, and according to Rab Shimon, it's the other way around. That Chenek is stricter. So we're going through each single one. How do you know which is stricter? Okay, so maybe we're starting up at the very bottom of the page, Tesla base. Up to the two dots so that we start to sugya. Skila Sreifa, says the Gemara. The Mem Tes on the base. On the very bottom. Skila Chamudim Sreifa. We're going to prove now each point. Now a lot of it is going to be redundant. It's going to repeat itself in today's Gemara is basically a Pshat Gemara. So Skila Chamudim Sreifa. Skila, and actually we learn halachah as well. We'll see. Interesting. Skila Chamudim Sreifa. Skila Strict Sreifa. How do I know? So let's just see who gets this punishment. What could be worse than somebody who's a blasphemer and an idol worshiper? My chumrah is going to ask, what's a chumrah? She came poisha yadabika. Adrabah, seifa chamura. Isn't burning more strict? She came nitna lebas koyin. She's into a bas koyin that commits adultery. Is what's the punishment? She gets a sreifa. And why should that be worse? Well, my chumrah, she came mechalel as avia. Then not only did she do an aveda, but she also affects her father. Not only does she give a bad name to her father, but her father becomes a cholul now. If father becomes a chol, he's no longer a kohen. He cannot do his avodah. So we see that she affects two people. So maybe that's worse. Kasavi Rabbanan hold that nesua yaitzel seifer, v'loy arusu. Now the thing is as follows. Just remember this because we're going to come back and forth to this. By a bas Yisrael, if she's merely engaged, she commits adultery while she's engaged, she gets skila. If once she's married, her punishment is chenek. A bas koyin, when she's married, she gets sleifa. But what happens to a bas koyin who is engaged? Now, bas Yisrael is engaged, gets skila. A bas koyin, in the pasuk, when it says a bas koyin gets sleifa, it doesn't make any distinction between married and not married, and so on. So what do we hold over there? As we'll see, that Shimon holds, it's not no difference. A bas koyin will get sreifa regardless if she's married or engaged, and that will be his raya that sreifa isn't even stricter than skila, because a bas Yisrael will get skila if she's engaged, and a bas koyin will get sreifa. Does not prove that she's stricter. That's Rab Shimon's raya. We're going to see later. Action halacha. You don't have to give him any more. The kidashta no longer applies for him. Amazing halacha. Usually we learn that halal means just stains the name, brings a disrepute to the family name. But in fact, okay, you brought that up. I'll tell you. Actually, I'll wait till I show you the line in the Gemara. In Kufchav Ches. In the Mordechai and everything else. What do you call it? What we're just saying, yeah. So, but the Chachamim hold, and this we discussed yesterday, the circular reasonings, we're going through this again quickly. The Chachamim hold that a bas koyin engaged gets skila, so it doesn't prove that skila is stricter. And that in itself is, we said yesterday, the whole circular reasoning. So Rashi says we omit part of the Gemara, and the bottom line according to Rashi is desecrating Hashem's name is the worst thing possible. End of story. Anyway, skila stricter. Okay, this is where we stopped yesterday. Says the Gemara, skila chamura b'sayv. How do you know that skila stricter than the sword? That's a punishment. We'll say the same thing. Skila, this is what the punishment for a blasphemer of Yom Chavim. We said before. No, adar b'sayv chamer shekenit l'anjei nadachas. Anjei nadachas also similar, idol worshipping, and they get saif. And why is that stricter? They get two punishments. They get saif and they get. They lose their money. Nobody else loses their money. Doesn't that show that their Aveda is unbelievable, that a tzibur worships our idol, and their punishment is Sayyif. So let's argue that Sayyif is even stricter than Skila. So we'll say the following. Which is worse? Koyach hamediach or koyach hanidach? The one who induces others to do the Aveda as well, or the one who just does it on his own? The Mesis and the Mediach or just the Nidach? In fact, we learned before that a mediach you don't have to give any warning to. We always have to try to defend the person, but not by a maces and mediach because they're terrible. They're the worst. And yet, what's the punishment for mediach? The people in the yadachas they get the sword. Of the mediach in yadachas biskila. The mediach in yadachas get skila. So what does that prove? That skila is stricter than saif. So you fine. Skila chomer chenek. How no skila stricter than chenek? She can't eat the magad. Same thing. She can't eat the magad of the worst kind of the sin. Like we said before, no maybe chenek. She can't eat the lemake of the imoy. This is given to someone who smites, who hits his parents, and what do they get for that? They get chenek. No, so why should that be worse? She can't hukash kvoidon lekovid amakim. That their covet is equal to the covet of Eiveshem. I told you yesterday that the chinuch holds that the whole mitzvah of kibbut of aim is predicated on the idea of teaching us to mechabed Eiveshem. And Achreim actually asked where did you get it from? We'll get it from right here. Because the Gemara is saying here that the whole inyan, the punishment for kibbut of aim, or makkah, we'll see later kibbut as well. The punishment for makkah is chenek because it's as if you're being makkah klayachol. So therefore, it's the same idea. Now, Achreim will have a hard time. Okay, you hit your parents. It's like you hit Abisha. So why should it be stricter? Why should the makkah of the chenek be stricter than skila when you mamish? This is like. So they learned not that chenek should be stricter than skila, but it should be equal to skila. That's the question. But after the answer, since the Torah took an arusa bas Yisrael instead of getting chenek, what's her punishment? She's merely engaged. She'll get skila. And Arusa restricted Miklal Nashib Azrael, Mechenek with skila, we upgrade. From Chenek, from strangulation to skila, Shmamna skila chamura. Now, how do you know that Arusa? Maybe on the contrary, maybe the other way around. Maybe in a suyu, married is much worse than you just engaged. Why do we think that engaged is worse? So Rashi explains, not so many words, but Rashi explains when you're engaged, she's affecting many more people. When you're married, basically, you're affecting only yourself, maybe your husband. But when you're engaged, you're still living at home. So you're affecting everyone. You're still living at home, so you're still related very close to your original family. So you're affecting all of them, in addition to your husband and yourself. Number one. Number two is when you're married, you're already a sort of a pugum. You're already a married woman. But saying in here, you're engaged, and this is the first time, and it's with a stranger. So the pagam is much greater. Therefore, arus is much worse than the suin. There's a much greater punishment, impacting more people and even on yourself. Okay, safe. Sefer Chamura Messiah, Hiro Sefer stricter than Sayyid, she can eat the Bas Koyin, she's into a Bas Koyin, that's Mazana, who's stricter than Bas Yisrael, we give Sefer. My Chumra, what's a Chumra? She came Mechalel es Avia. She's Mechalel Avia. And what does it mean? If Mechalel Avia means merely you're staining your father and a Bas Yisrael doesn't, what's the difference of Bas Koyin or Bas Yisrael? What I mean, if you take normal pshat, that Mechalel means you're giving a bad name. And the Bas Yisrael doesn't give a bad name. Or we expect more from a koyin, and therefore the bad name is worse than if it's a bad name on Yisrael. But if it has no literal effect, if it has no effect whatsoever, then really, at the end of the day, what's the big difference? So we'll see in a minute. Adrabah, Sayiv Chomer, Sayiv is strict. You need to answer Yadachas. He gives answer Yadachas. Umar Chomer came away over too. So we answer here, we have a Gzeira Shava. Nemar, it says of the Abiskila. The Nemar says of the Abisreifa. Ma avia amu beskila skila chamura. It says that we have the word avia by skila, and we have the word avia. It says lizna base avia, and therefore give a skila. And by a bas koyin, it says also the word avia. Avia he mechalelas. So we make it as gzer shava. Ma avia amu beskila. Just like avia, it says by skila. When she's mezana. Skila chamura mesayif. Skila we proved already before is stricter than sayif. Is af avia ha'oma b'sreifa, because the madiach gets skila versus the nidach gets only sayif. So also avia said by sreifa chamura misayif. Okay, sreifa mordechai. The kitzer, the Ramah writes a Shulchan Aruch that, if I remember correctly now. The Ramah writes a Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Chav Ches, you have all the laws of koyin, that a koyin whose daughter was mezana. But then the Ramah adds, Shehemira oy mezana, she shmatzich, or she's mezana, he's a hollow. No. It's talking about the Siz Kapai. Talking about the Siz Kapai. Oh, okay. Okay. Fine. Okay, good. So we're on the same page. But the Ramah adds Oisha Hemira Avodah Zorah, which is what's Ramah Pasha. In other words, if your daughter embrace some other religion, Chas v'Shalom, we'll learn in Hilchos Shabbos. We learn, how you learn for the Bechal Shabbos to take away from that in Shimon Gimel. It's over here. So he adds that. So the Magen has a big problem with that. The Gemara is saying, why is Nusa Chumra? Why is Seifa Chumra? Because she's Mechal her father, but Even Avodah Zarah also Mechal her father. You just tell me Shehimira, which is Even Avodah Zarah, that's also Mechal her father. So why are you telling me the Chumra in Sreifa, Even Avodah Zarah, which you get Skila, has the same thing, according to the Mordechai, which is what the Ramah brings down. So he has a big problem with that. But then the Magen was very interesting shot. When the Mordechai said Shehemira is because we then assume she probably was Mizana. Because as a non-Jew, she's not careful, and therefore she probably was Mizana. So it's not the Hemira that is Mechal the father, it's the assumption that she was Miznus, and that's what's Mizana, that's Mechal the father. Then why should there be a difference? But let's think in logic. My Ron says a fascinating thing. Why should there be? It's a long way across. Why should there be a difference if the daughter was Mizana or the daughter was Shema or any Chil Shabbos? So he says an interesting thing. He says tznius is something that you teach your kids when they're young, and if you ingrain them with tznius, you train them to behave, modestly. Chances are, even whatever they become later on, it's in their nature. And so, therefore, if there's nus, that means you didn't do your job as a parent. When it comes to other Vedas, Chil Shabbos, what guarantees do you have when the kid grows up how they're going to behave? You have people who fry out, and the parents gave the best chiluk possible, but unfortunately, things happen. Amazing about Avram. There's Kuf Chav Ches Sif Mem Gimel. Amazing about Avram. An insight in the psyche of in chinuch. So tznius is something much more. Stays with the person. Stays with the person. Yeah. So it becomes nature. It's not even Yiddishkeit. It becomes their teva. Exactly. Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay. Then they have a whole discussion. This is Rishus Yaakov and others. Why Bas? What about a Ben? If the Ramah says Hey Mira, and the son is Rishmatzik, why doesn't the father get affected by that? And they need a good explanation for that. I don't remember. Rishus Yaakov, I don't remember. Anyway, back to the Gemara. So anyway, right? Sreifa Chamura Mesayib. How do you know Sreifa is stricter than Mesayib? Sreifa Chamura Mechenek. Sreifa is stricter than Chenek. She can't nitna lebas koyin. Same thing. Now we're going to say every single time why is Sreifa strict? Because a bas Yisrael gets Chenek and a bas koyin gets Sreifa. So obviously stricter. She said, we said before, which is tantamount to so he says it. The eye is the bas Yisrael gets punishment chenek. On the Surah bas koyin, that's a level above, gets elevated to Sreifa. What does that tell you? That Sreifa is strict in the chenek. Bas koyin, bas Yisrael, mechenek was Sreifa. Shma'amenos proves to you Sreifa chamura. Sa'iv chama mechenek. So we're working our way through every single one of the punishments. How do you know it's stricter than the one below? How do you know that Saif is stricter than Chenek? We use it in Adachas as a proof. My Chumra gets two punishments. Not only they get killed, they also lose their money. And normally we say, you never have it anywhere else. Here you do. What's the stringency about that? She can't hukash. I feel whenever we don't have an answer, we go back to the original thing we said. The fact is, this is against the Eibusher. What can be worse than that? Okay, that explains the Chachamim. Now we're going to go through the same thing of Shimon. And a lot of it is similar, but Rav Shimon holds that Seifa is strict, and they have to remember, Rav Shimon argues a very key point, which we'll say then in the Gemara. Rav Shimon holds that a Bas Koyin, that is Mazana while she's engaged, you, the Chachamim, say that she gets Skila. I say she gets Sreifa. And I learned from the pasuk because the Torah doesn't make a difference between by a bas koyin, heichel is nice, makes no difference who she is. And once we've established that she gets Sreifa, does not prove that Sreifa is strict in the skilla. Because a bas Yisrael Arusa gets skilla, and a bas Yisrael Nesuya gets chenek, and we elevate her by Nesua. We make a koyin stricter. How can it be by Narusa we're going to make a koyin lighter, a bas koyin lighter, go down a step? Obviously, we're going up a step again. Must be that Sreifa is strict in the skilla. So that's the final conclusion of Rav Shimon. but the Gemara starts off, backwards. So the Gemara starts. Seifa Chamur Meskila Haranosh Kinil Bas Koyin Shinza. Bas Koyin Shinza. Bas Koyin Shinza. What do you call gets Reifa? My Chumrish came a Halal Zabir. Adrab Skilla Chamura. Skilla should be stricter. She need to make out of the Chavim. My Chumrish can Yosh Bosh Fajar be concluded before. What could be worse than that? I'm going against Hashem. Rab Shimon Taimei. Rab Shimon is consistent with you, which later on we'll learn from the pasuk. The Amar Achas Harusa, the Achas Nesua, Yotzul Seifa. Both of them get Seifa. And since the Torah takes a Bas Koyin who is only engaged away from Skila and brings it to Seifa, must be going up. Seifa stricter. Seifa Chamura Mechenik. How do I know that Seifa is stricter than Chenik? Same thing. Can you go Bas Koyin? That's what Bas Koyin gets to do. My Chumra Kedamran. Other Mechenik Chamosh can little Makovi go through the whole thing again. My Koyin Meshigan Hukush Kvoidam the cover Hamakam. So he said again, with the Avke Rachmana, the same point. The Torah took out on the Suya Bas Koyin, Biklan the Suya Bas Yisrael, on the Suya Bas Yisrael gets Chenik. And remember that the Reb Shimon holds a Chenik is stricter than Sayif. So there is anyway. So since a Bas Yisrael gets Chenik and a Bas Koyin will get Sreifa, that proves that Sreifa is stricter than Chenik. The Avke Rachman and the Suya Bas Koyin, Miklan the Suya Bas Yisrael, the Torah takes out a Bas Koyin, a married one. If it's different than all the Bas Yisrael, they get Chenik and she gets Sreifa. Mechenik the Seifa. Shmamina Seifa Chamura Seifa stricter. Okay, Seifa Chamura Seifa. How do I know Seifa stricter than Sayev? Okay, need to know the Bas Koyin should into the same thing. Umay Chumra Kedam, like we said before. Either a Sayev Chumra should need to know the Achas. My Chumra came and mine them over, they lose the money. Amrit, we say, which is worse? Who is it throwing a worse of Veda? Koich HaMadiach or Koich HaNidach? I would say Koich Madiach, the one who's inducing. And what is his punishment? He gets skila. And he gets skila. He's a Kal Chayma. Uma Chenek. Shechamar Messiah. Remember, according to Rab Shimon, Chenek is stricter than Saif. We'll see more later how he knows that. And Madar Chenek, which is stricter than Saif. And Sreifa Chamurim Imeno, Sreifa is stricter than that. How do I know? Because the Bas Koyin gets elevated from Chenek if she's a married woman and she goes up to Seif. So we know Seif is stricter than Chenek, we just said. And Chenek is stricter than Saif. Is Saif Hakal like Koshke? So surely Seif is stricter than, if Streifa is stricter than Chenek, and Chenek is stricter than Saif, then surely Seif is stricter than Saif. Skill Chaman Chenek. How do I know skill is stricter than Chenek? Remember, according to Shimon, skill is a step down. She can't need to make out of that punishment. My Chumra Kedam, like we said before, undermining Hashem. Other Chenek Chomer, she can need to make out my Chumra can hookers hitting your father. With the Avke Rachmana, I say proof. You take him out of Chenek and you give him with the Avke Rachmana, La Rusa Bas Yisrael. A woman, a Bas Yisrael is engaged. What do they get? They get skila. And a Bas Koyin, according to Rab Shimon, is engaged, gets Sreifa. So what does that tell you? So we see from there, and we already said before that we know skill is Sreifa stricter, but now we know skill is stricter because we're taking a Bas Yisrael is engaged and we're elevating her from Chenek to Skila. And I explained before, as Rashi says, Arusa is stricter than an Asura because she's affecting not just herself, but the Pagam is greater and affecting her own family much stronger than if she's married and left home already and she's independent. Skila Chaman Sayyif. How do I know Skila is stricter than Sayyif? According to Rab Shimon, she came to Megadim. Other Rabbi Sayyif Chaman can eat Lanji as Achaz my Chumra. What's the Chumra? She came in mind of it. We say who's worse? The one who induces. And he gets. And what does he get? He gets Skila. So Kal Chayim. That's stricter than Saif. Skila stricter than it. Saif Hakal like Koshke. So surely Skila stricter than Saif. Could have just said that the very fact that Mediach gets Skila rather than Saif, that in itself proves that Skila is stricter, without having to resort to this Kal V'Chayim, Chenek is stricter than Saif, and Skila is stricter than Chenek. Surely, could we just said, look what happens. The Mediach, who's worse? The Mediach, and the Mediach instead of getting Saif, gets Skila. That proves that Skila is stricter. Okay, true, but the way we learn right now, the Mediach himself is also over that way. Choyte u'machtas rabim is choyte u'machtas rabim. Yeah.
What you said that you were going to do is that's
He's talking about no, we're talking about the beneficiary, not the Mediach, the Nidach, the person listening. He can say, "I never expect you to listen to me." Like the Nachash with Chaba. Exactly. I was just a goyim. I caused it, and he shouldn't have listened to me.
I know I'm wrong, but I tried to do something.
It's like the Nachash. Remember we learned before. He could have defended himself, but he didn't.
There's a crew of
Okay, Chenek Chama Messiah. Chenek is the stricter Messiah if she can eat in the Makkah of the Imai. Chenek is stricter because that's what happens when you hit your parents. And my chumra, like we said before. Adrab Sayyid Chama she can eat in the my chumra came in my but Amit we say. So we just said it. No, say it again. So now we're trying to prove that that Chenek is stricter than Saif. I know Chenek is stricter than Saif. So we're saying it because by we said you're telling me because he hit your parents is Chenek, but there over there you get. So we say this. Who's worse, the Madich or the Nidich? The time we learned Madich in Dach Maskil, but Rav Shimon says Madich or Madach gets Chenek. I guess that's why we couldn't say before skila because it's takenat skila. It's chenek. Now a madiach is worse than a nidach, and according to Rav Shimon, what's the punishment? He learns from a pasuk later on. We'll see chenek. So chenek has to be stricter than saif. Saif is the nidachim, irham dachas, and the madiach, the one who convinced them, gets chenek. Must be chenek is stricter than saif. And learn that later. Margil b'pumim v'yochanan. Usually, when you have the word margil b'pumim, means it's a custom. No, rogel, this is say, but some of the shayne say margil means a brilliant pearl, a precious, a beautiful thing that Rabbi Yechon used to say. He said, basically, gleaned on all of this. Now, the nafkamina of all this, who cares what punishment is strict? The nafkamina is if he deserves an Aveda or two Avedas that deserve these two punishments, which punishment are you going to give him? You always give him the stricter one. So we need to know which is stricter. So it comes along and he says, conclusion, says Rabbi Yechon. Let's wrap it all up. So we had all this whole pullum. Naida Morasa, Bas Koyin, Shazinska, a Naida Morasa, a Bas Koyin. That was Mazana, according to Chacham, gets skilla. Because the Bas Yisrael gets skilla, how can a Bas Koyin get less? But according to Rav Shimon, Sreifa, a Bas Yisrael gets skilla, but a Bas Koyin who's worse is Sreifa, because he'll Sreifa is stricter. That's number one. Number two, Zinsa Me'avia. If someone was Mazana, anyone, from her father, even a Bas Yisrael, is beskila. If you're mizana with your father, you get skila. And Rav Shimon says you get sreifa. Again, because in Samavi you get the strictest punishment, that's skila. And Rav Shimon the strictest is sreifa. Mike Mashman, what's he coming to tell you? That Rabbanon Nesua Yatzal sreifa. A married woman gets sreifa v'lo yarusa. A married Bas Koyin gets Sreifa, but not in the Rusa. Why should she go step down? Because Abban holds skila is the strictest. So why in the world would a Bas Koyin go down to Sreifa? That's why they say that. According to Shimon, whether you're Arusa, whether you're you get safer. Why safer? Because Sreifa is the strictest. A Bas Yisrael engaged, she's Mazana, she'll get skila. But a Bas Koyin who's stricter gets Sreifa because Shimon holds that Sreifa is worse. But time in Mai, and what's the reason? Rabban is kila chamura, and Rav Shimon sreifa chamura. Because Rav Shimon sreifa is the worst possible punishment. Nafkamina, what's the difference? Why do you have to know what's stricter? Lemishin is chayiv. They misses bezin. If somebody committed two sins, let's say he deserves two different punishments. Nidam bechamur. You always give the strictest one. My Rav Shimon, what's his Rav Shimon? The time we learned Rav Shimon said, Shnei klolis nemru. There were two rules said, but Bas Koyin. The two rules said by Bas Koyin, one regarding a girl who's engaged and one regarding a girl who's married. Now, when the Torah said a married woman gets killed, everybody's included, a Bas Koyin as well. What's the difference? And that what? And what does a married Bas Yisrael get? Chenek. So the Torah didn't specify only Bas Yisrael. So even a Bas Koyin would also get Chenek. Then the Torah says that a Bas Yisrael and a Rusa gets skila. Then I would have thought about no. The Torah makes no difference here. Bas Koyin, Bas Yisrael, so the same dinim. So l'chayla Bas Koyin, Poshel Pshat should get chenek if she was married, and skila if she was engaged. That's rule number two. Rule number one is regarding a married Bas Yisrael, which includes Bas Koyin, and rule number two is an engaged Bas Yisrael, which includes a Koyin. Right? Shnei kol nemru Bas Koyin, Bas Koyin, Bas Yisrael. So you want to ask a question? The Bas Koyin, but these rules are said by Bas Yisrael. The Bas Koyin. The Bas Kohen v'loy Bas Yisrael. The Torah is talking about a Bas Yisrael, and you're including a Kohen. Before you even get further, Ema after Bas Kohen. Notice when the Torah made these rules, the difference between a married woman and engaged woman makes no distinction. Bas Kohen, so they're all the same. Then Then the Torah says that you should know that a Bas Kohen is different. Now, when the Torah says the Bas Kohen is different, the Torah also doesn't make a difference. The Bas Kohen is married or the Bas Kohen is engaged. It just says, Kiseicha Liznois and so on and so forth. And then it says, Sabi Mechalelis and Be'esh Tisar. Torah makes no distinction between the two. So since the Torah takes out Nesua, Miklal Nesua, Ba'arusa, Miklal Arusa, so we're going to make the following equation. Makisha Hoitia Kosher Nesua, Miklal Nesua. When Bas Kohen is different than a Bas Yisrael, what is a Bas Kohen's punishment? Sreifa, when she's a married woman. And since the Torah puts the two together, no difference to married or engaged. So what's a Bas Kohen engaged? What she'll get the same punishment? Sreifa. But the Bas Yisrael gets skila. Why is the Bas Kohen getting Sreifa? Must be that Sreifa is stricter than skila. That's Hobson's point. And when she's married, what are we doing to the Bas Kohen? We're elevating her, making a stricter punishment. She's going to get streifa instead of strangulation. Is arusa miklal arusa. So when a Bas Kohen and arusa will get streifa as well, not skila. Lahachmir to be machmir okay, to be machmir. Another thing, the Torah's chumrah is only regarding a Bas Kohen. But if two agents try to, say accuse her of adultery, then turned out to be that they were liars, they are not going to get the punishment of a Bas Kohen. They're going to get the punishment as if she was a Bas Yisrael. So she'll either get what do you call it, chenek or skila, depending, if she's married or engaged, what they were accusing her of. So Zay Menusul Bas Kohen B'chal Zay Menusul Yisrael and Zay Me'arusa Bas Kohen B'chal Zay Me'arusa Yisrael. Whatever the punishment Bas Yisrael to get. But we learn now. We're learning a brayse, and tomorrow's Gemara is going to explain the whole brayse. So we learned the Basis Kohen, a Basis Kohen Kiseichel Yochel. I would have thought of Chilas a Shabbos. It says Kiseichel. I would have thought that even if she's Mechal Shabbos, it should affect her father as well. We discussed before that if she mizana or if she shmatzich, but that's it, no other avedas. And the Gemara said we would have thought even Mechal Shabbos. The Gemara later will explain why we would have thought even Mechal Shabbos. Tamalayim said the party is nice, only is nus. The chilulish of nus the only time she does it is if she was Mechal beznus. Yochel, I would have thought I feel a pnuya. I would have thought even if she's not married at all, a single girl, she's bringing disrepute to the family, maybe affecting Mechal father to a certain extent. Then Makan says over here of Viha. We had before the two words of Via by Skila and by Sreifa. Malahal is nus because the Baal over there when we say that's Skila. She was caught. She committed adultery. She was a married woman. Afkan over here also when it comes to Kiseicha Liznais, Avia, Mechalala is talking about there's nus as a married woman or engaged woman. No, there's a husband involved, not like when she's a single girl. Maybe it doesn't say Via Elohaitis Kaladam. Maybe that to tell you that if she was mezaneh with her own father, she gets streifa. But if she's mezaneh with any other person, maybe Avi means with who she consorted with, not not the way you wanted to say that, to tell you that you teach her shove an extra word. Because she's the one who did all the bad thing. Not the five, because if the father and her together consorted, then why is she blaming it all on her? They're both equally culpable. But saying he mechalela, she did it all, means that she's doing the stranger. Haman become a via. So what do I do with the extra word of via? What's the relevance of the father? Nema kanavia, nemalavia. Malahal zuzikabal. Just over there is a married woman. Afkan zuzikabal. Imalahal naida via arusa. The whole pasuk over there of via is talking about a girl who's 12 years old, between 12 and 12 and a half, and she's engaged. And she was caught in all that. Afkan naida via arusa. So maybe this whole thing of a bas kohen is limited. The window is only between 12 and 12 and a half. That's it. Suya, and she's married. Bagetis, whatever she's a bagetis, the Arusa. In that case, if she's married. What about she's a bagetis? She's over 12 and a half, but Bas Kohen, and she was engaged. Or bagetis Suya, or over 12 and a half, and she's married. But feeling his kid, she's an older woman, much older. Not only just a bagetis in her teens, much older. How do you know that if she's a Bas Kohen, her father Mechalal Tambalayim, or a Bas Kohen Mikol Mokim? And actually said from the extra above, any age. Bas Kohen. Ainly Ela Shanisas Lakoin. Bas Kohen maybe means that she's still a Kohen. that she still can eat truma because she's married to a kohen. How do I know if Nisas or Levi, she got engaged and married to a Levi or to Yisrael, which she loses her kuna, she can no longer eat truma? How do I know then that she'll be saying that she ruins her father's reputation? She's married to a Levi, to Yisrael, to a Oived Kochavim, to a goy. Peladig, I'll tell you in a second. We'll do it tomorrow. I'll tell you tomorrow. The cholol, if she's married to a cholol, these are all averis. But we learn that kedushin are teifus b'chayavi lavin. That kedushin are teifus and chayavi lavin. The cholol ulemamzel and the sin. These are all people you should marry. If you're married, you're engaged to them. Even though the Rashi before he said that this whole Gemara goes according to Rabbi Akiva because he's one of Darshas an extra above, and Rabbi Akiva says that kedusha are not chal by kedusha lavin, but
even in such a marriage, if she's exactly.
She's Mechal, exactly. Even though she already Mechal. Oh, but Kedusha Chai, even Rabbi Akiva says, according to one opinion, the Gemara Yavamas, only if it's not Chal because it's incest or because of some kind of relationship. It's called she'er. But if it's like a mamza sin, nothing with she'er, then even Rabbi Akiva holds the kedusha chal. So even though you're living in sin, so you can argue you already ruined your father's reputation. Well, what are you adding by doing whatever? Marrying to a mamza it is. Nevertheless, how do you know Tamalema? Ubas ish kohen. Afa pish enikena. She is not a kohen anymore because she did all that. Nevertheless, if she commits nus. Then it says he, said the pasuk he, and what do you mean he? Avia he mechalel, she b'sreifa. The man that she's consorting with does not get sreifa. He b'sreifa, the ein zayimeh b'sreifa, not her, not the witnesses. They get the whatever the husband is. Now Belezer Aimer, we'll just finish one more line. Belezer says es avia b'sreifa. What do you know? It says avia she gets sreifa, but chamer, if we'll see later his relationship with the father-in-law. This skila. We'll see about the father-in-law and the skila Gemara will explain later why that should be different. What's he trying to say? We'll stop here. The Gemara now is going to try to explain the entire brisa. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem. Have a good day.